Before we talk about intelligence, before we assign it levels or give it names, let me ask you something quietly, almost conspiratorially, as if we're alone in a dark theater just before the screen lights up. Have you ever felt like you were surrounded by people who were technically smart, educated, capable, yet somehow blind? Blind to patterns, blind to consequences, blind to human nature. Or maybe, at some point in your life, you realized with a strange chill that you were the blind one, that the world you thought you understood was only a thin surface, and beneath it moved forces you had never been taught to see. This is not a video about IQ scores or school grades. This is about perception, awareness, and the quiet hierarchies of the mind that shape power, survival, and destiny. And by the end of this story, whether you want to or not, you'll start to sense where you stand. Niccolo Machiavelli once wrote that the rarest form of intelligence is the ability to see things as they are, not as we wish them to be. That single sentence contains an entire universe of meaning. And tonight, we're going to walk through that universe slowly, layer by layer, level by level, not as a lecture, but as a journey. Because intelligence, real intelligence, is not something you can measure cleanly. It reveals itself in how people move through the world, in what they notice, in what they ignore, and in the choices they make when no one is watching. The first level of intelligence is the most common and, for many, the most comfortable. It is the intelligence of reaction. People at this level live almost entirely inside the present moment, responding to life as it hits them, like waves crashing against a shoreline that never moves. They react emotionally, instinctively, often loudly. When something good happens, they celebrate. When something bad happens, they complain, they blame, they lash out. Their minds are shaped by habit, by culture, by whatever environment raised them. They don't ask why things are the way they are. They ask who's responsible and how it makes them feel. To them, life is something that happens, not something that is navigated. This level isn't stupid. That's important to understand. Many people here are clever, funny, even talented, but their intelligence is outward-facing, not reflective. They rarely observe themselves thinking. Their beliefs are inherited, not examined. If everyone around them agrees on something, it must be true. If authority says something, it must be right. And because of this, they are easy to lead, easy to manipulate, easy to distract. They live in a world of headlines, slogans, and surface-level explanations, never suspecting that anything deeper exists. And the tragedy is that most will never know there is another way to see. The second level begins the moment a person starts asking questions, not because they were told to, but because something feels off. This is the intelligence of logic and structure. These individuals learn how systems work. They understand rules, processes, and cause and effect. They can analyze problems, follow arguments, and spot inconsistencies. This is the intelligence rewarded by schools, exams, and most professional environments. Engineers, accountants, technicians, analysts often live here, and society depends on them more than it likes to admit. Yet there is a quiet limitation at this level. While these minds understand systems, they often assume the systems are neutral. They believe rules exist to be followed, not bent. They trust that institutions function as designed. They think fairness is built into the structure rather than negotiated through power. Their intelligence is clean, orderly, and reliable. But it is also naive. They don't yet see how human desire distorts logic, how ambition warps systems, or how appearances are often engineered. They know how the machine works, but not who is pulling the levers. The third level arrives like a slow awakening. This is the intelligence of patterns. People here begin to notice repetition across time. They see how history echoes itself, how the same mistakes wear different masks, how human behavior follows predictable arcs. They understand incentives. They start to grasp that people don't act based on truth or morality alone, but on fear, reward, status, and survival. This is where Machiavelli begins to whisper in the background, reminding us that power does not belong to the virtuous, but to the observant. At this level, intelligence becomes uncomfortable. You start seeing hypocrisy everywhere. You realize that public narratives rarely match private motives. You notice how leaders say one thing and do another, not because they're evil caricatures, but because they are human, driven by pressures most never acknowledge. This awareness can feel isolating. Conversations become harder. You start to sense that others are playing a different game without realizing it. And once you see the patterns, you can't unsee them. The fourth level of intelligence is where understanding turns inward. This is psychological intelligence. Here, a person begins to study not just others, but themselves. They recognize their own biases, their emotional triggers, their blind spots. They understand that the mind is not a transparent window to reality, but a filter shaped by trauma, desire, and fear. This level is rare because it requires humility, and humility is painful. It means accepting that you are not as rational as you thought, not as independent, not as objective. People at this level can read rooms. They sense unspoken tensions, hidden agendas, emotional undercurrents. They understand persuasion, not as manipulation, but as alignment. They know when someone is lying, not by catching contradictions, but by feeling incongruence. And perhaps most importantly, they learn restraint. They don't react immediately. They pause. They observe. They let others reveal themselves. In a world addicted to speed and outrage, this quiet control becomes a form of power. The fifth level is where intelligence becomes strategic. This is the realm Machiavelli truly lived in. Strategic intelligence is the ability to think several moves ahead, not just in chess or business, but in human interaction. These individuals understand timing. They know when to speak and when silence is more devastating. They can predict reactions not perfectly, but accurately enough to shape outcomes. They see life as a series of interconnected games, each with its own rules, players, and stakes. At this level, morality becomes complex. Not because these people lack values, but because they understand trade-offs. They know that every choice costs something, that purity often loses to pragmatism, and that intentions matter less than results. This intelligence can be dangerous in the wrong hands because it allows someone to influence others without being seen. But it can also be protective. Strategic thinkers often survive situations that destroy more rigid minds, not through strength, but through foresight. The sixth level of intelligence is rare enough that most people will never knowingly encounter it. This is the intelligence of systems within systems. These individuals don't just understand patterns or strategies, they understand emergence. They see how small actions ripple outward, how unintended consequences reshape entire landscapes, how culture, economics, psychology, and biology intertwine. They think in decades, not moments. They don't chase trends. They anticipate shifts. There is often a loneliness at this level. When you see too far ahead, it becomes difficult to explain your concerns without sounding paranoid or detached. You watch people argue about surface issues while deeper forces quietly rearrange the world. You feel the weight of foresight without the authority to act. Many retreat into writing, research, or silence. Others become architects of movements, ideologies, or institutions, shaping reality subtly over time. And then there is the seventh level, the one almost never named. This is the intelligence of self-mastery. It is not about knowing more, predicting better, or controlling others. It is about controlling oneself completely. People at this level understand power, but are not enslaved by it. They understand fear, but are not driven by it. They see the game, but are no longer desperate to win it. This intelligence feels calm, grounded, almost invisible. These individuals act with precision, not urgency. They choose their battles carefully, knowing that most conflicts are distractions. They are comfortable being misunderstood, underestimated, even forgotten, because their identity is not built on external validation. In Machiavelli's terms, they have learned how to rule their own nature, which is the hardest state to govern. Now, here is the uncomfortable truth. Intelligence is not a ladder you climb once and finish. People move between levels depending on stress, environment, and awareness. You might be strategic at work, reactive at home, psychologically aware with friends, and blind to patterns in your own life. Ranking is not about superiority. It's about honesty, about noticing where you default, where you resist growth, where you cling to comfort instead of clarity. So, where do you rank? Not where do you want to rank, not where your education says you should be, but where your mind actually lives, day after day, decision after decision. The answer is not something you say out loud. It's something you feel in moments of silence, when no one is watching, and you're forced to confront how deeply you see, how carefully you think, and how consciously you choose. Because the most Machiavellian truth of all is this: the world does not reward intelligence evenly. It rewards the kind that understands reality, not ideals. And the moment you truly see where you stand is the moment you're given a choice: to remain where you are, or to begin the slow, often uncomfortable climb toward a clearer, colder, more powerful understanding of the world and yourself. And that choice, the one that quietly appears the moment you recognize your own level of intelligence, is never dramatic. It doesn't arrive with a soundtrack or a life-altering event. It arrives in silence, in the small decisions you make when no one is applauding, when there is no immediate reward for thinking deeper or acting differently. Most people never consciously make this choice at all. They drift. They remain within the level that feels safest, most familiar, most socially acceptable. Growth, after all, comes with friction, and friction feels like danger to the mind. If you stay where you are, life remains predictable. Your reactions stay automatic. Your beliefs stay inherited. Your frustrations stay externalized. The world continues to feel unfair, chaotic, and hostile, and you remain convinced that the problem exists somewhere outside yourself. There is comfort in this, a strange comfort, but a powerful one. It absolves you of responsibility. It allows you to point outward instead of inward, and society, in many ways, is designed to keep you here, distracted, entertained, emotionally stimulated, but never truly awakened. But if you choose to move upward, even slightly, something unsettling begins to happen. You start losing certainty before you gain clarity. The stories you once relied on to make sense of the world begin to crack. You realize how often you've been manipulated by fear, by authority, by group identity. You notice how frequently your own emotions have hijacked your logic, how often you've mistaken confidence for competence, volume for truth. This is the cost of awareness, and it is a cost few are willing to pay. As you ascend, relationships begin to change, not because you want them to, but because perception alters connection. When you start seeing patterns, you notice who thrives on chaos and who fears silence. When you understand psychology, you sense when conversations are performances rather than exchanges. When you develop strategy, you recognize how often people act against their own long-term interests for short-term comfort. This doesn't make you superior, but it does make you different. And difference creates distance. This is where many people turn back. They mistake isolation for failure. They interpret discomfort as a sign they've gone too far. It's tempting at this stage to dull your awareness, to laugh off your insights, to rejoin the noise. But Machiavelli would remind you that the masses do not reject truth because it is false. They reject it because it is inconvenient. Seeing clearly often means standing alone, at least for a while. The higher levels of intelligence demand patience. They force you to accept delayed gratification, not just materially, but psychologically. You begin to understand that not every truth needs to be spoken, not every injustice confronted, not every battle fought. This restraint is often misunderstood as passivity, but in reality, it is precision. Strategic minds conserve energy. They observe. They wait. They act only when action compounds rather than dissipates. At the level of psychological and strategic intelligence, you also begin to recognize something deeply unsettling. Intelligence does not equal goodness. Some of the most perceptive minds use their awareness to exploit rather than elevate. They understand fear, desire, and loyalty intimately, and they weaponize that understanding. Machiavelli never glorified this. He merely described it. Power, he knew, does not ask for permission from morality. It asks only for effectiveness, and this realization forces a personal reckoning. Once you understand how influence works, you can no longer claim innocence. You know how words shape perception. You know how timing alters meaning. You know how silence can manipulate just as much as speech. From this point on, every action becomes a reflection of your character, not your ignorance. This is where intelligence intersects with ethics, not as a rule book, but as a mirror. Those who reach the 6th level often struggle with despair. When you see systems clearly, you also see how resistant they are to change. You realize that corruption is not an anomaly, but a feature, that inefficiency is often intentional, that suffering is frequently collateral damage in games played far above the public eye. This awareness can feel crushing. You might ask yourself what the point of understanding is if understanding doesn't guarantee the ability to fix anything. Yet this is where a quieter wisdom emerges. You begin to see that control is an illusion most people chase to avoid facing uncertainty. True intelligence does not attempt to dominate reality. It learns how to move with it. You stop trying to force outcomes and start shaping probabilities. You accept that influence is subtle, incremental, and often invisible. And in that acceptance, a strange peace begins to form. The 7th level, self-mastery, is not about withdrawal from the world. It is about engagement without attachment. You participate, but you are not consumed. You care, but you are not ruled by emotion. You understand loss, but you are not destroyed by it. This level is marked by an internal stillness that remains even in chaos, a calm that does not come from ignorance, but from clarity. People at this level rarely announce themselves. They don't need to prove how much they know. They don't argue for dominance in conversations or broadcast their intelligence for validation. They listen more than they speak. When they do speak, their words land with weight because they are chosen, not impulsive. Others often sense something different about them, something grounded, even if they can't name it. And here is the final, uncomfortable truth that Machiavelli understood long before modern psychology ever tried to explain it. Intelligence is not about being right. It is about being effective in reality as it exists. Ideals are beautiful, but they are fragile. Reality is harsh, but it is consistent. Those who survive, who shape outcomes, who leave lasting impact, are not always the smartest in theory, but the most attuned to truth in practice. So when you ask yourself where you rank, don't answer with pride or shame. Answer with curiosity. Observe how you react under pressure. Notice how often you question your own assumptions. Pay attention to whether you seek comfort or clarity when faced with uncertainty. Intelligence reveals itself not in what you know, but in how you adapt, how you learn, and how honestly you see yourself. Because the moment you stop pretending to be intelligent and start becoming aware instead is the moment the real journey begins. Not upward, not downward, but inward, toward a mind that is awake, disciplined, and unafraid to look at the world without illusions. And in a world built on appearances, that may be the most powerful position of all.